Hey, what's up team? This is Eddie Gray. Welcome to the channel, The Modern Creative. And today we're looking at the Console 1 Mark III. The question is really simple. Is it worth it? You attach a $900 price tag next to this, and every producer, every beat maker wants to know, is it a worthy upgrade? Well, you're about to find out. Here we go. In this video, I'll be covering an overview of the unit, what to expect, what's new, what's different from the Console 1 Mark II, first things to do when setting it up, and then lastly, we'll answer the question, is it worth it? So at first glance, you can see that the unit is actually bigger than the Console 1 Mark II, so there's that to consider when looking at desk space. Obviously, there are lights, there are different touch strips that have LED lights, so all of this is very nice, but let's look at the important stuff. We have the tape preamp, one section, filter 2, two shape components, that's 4, two equalizers 6, two compressors 8, and then the drive section. Really, the most promising feature is that we have dual sections for shape, dual sections for equalization, and then dual sections for compressors. Why this is important? Well, let's say you want to make corrective EQ with one instance, and then you'd like to just add some vintage color on the second EQ. That's a fantastic way to use this. For compression, for example, you can have peak compression on the first compressor, and then you can have balancing or leveling compression with the second. I think shape offers the most versatile options. For example, I can have transient shaping with the first instance, and then I can use gating or tape flutter with the second. This is going to be developing much further, especially as it relates to the tape and preamp. Right now there's just a couple of presets, but I imagine this is going to be very robust in the near future. If we go to the DAW, you can see the core mixing software that comes with the hardware. This is a very sleek design that allows you to set up your channel strip just the way you like it. You can use this if you're traveling and don't have access to the hardware, but really you're going to be using the overlay, which looks something like this. This is the Console 1 software. You can change all the various viewing modes. I personally just stick to this view because I have everything that I need right in front of me. Also new to the hardware is the core panner. They call this a mono-compatible spatial panning algorithm. To simplify that language, we really have the ability to use balance panning here and then true stereo panning with the core panner. So that right there, I think, is a really big part of the equation if you're looking to simplify your mixing needs. We do have Q values on the high and the low bands. This wasn't available before. So if I hold shift here, you can see that we have the ability to create different slopes for the high and low cut. And the same goes for the core modern equalizer. You can change the slopes here. It's now possible to turn off the automatic makeup gain for all the compressors. You could not do this in the past. So if I turn on this first compressor here and I hold shift, you can see that auto makeup gain is on, but if you'd like to turn that off, you can do that manually here. So that's definitely a big upgrade in terms of workflow. It's definitely worth it to mention that the overall feel is better. I don't know if it's $900 better, but the fact that you can do something like this where like I'm adjusting volume and then I can just double tap that specific encoder and everything just resets to 0, that is kind of amazing, right? Let's say you make an EQ move and then you decide to go back to 0. That is slick. We do have undo and redo functions as well, but that right there is definitely key for me. So brand new to the Console 1 Mark III are the experimental groups. I don't think that's the official term, but if we look up here, you can see by holding shift, you can select experimental group A, B, C, and D. And this basically allows you to create different settings and to be able to kind of swap back and forth between them. And so that I think is a gold mine for those of us that are looking to just be hands-on with the unit and spend a lot more time away from the mouse. So experimental groups is definitely massive with this new unit. We also have favorite modes, which is going to replace what used to be called layer mode. Favorites is a way to easily access the most important tracks in your mix. So let's say you slap this on your buses, your lead vocals. This is a way to basically quickly work within your session. I only have a couple of tracks here within my session, but if I hold shift and I hit the favorites button, you can see that I've isolated the most important tracks in my session, and I can work on those, and then I can get out of favorites mode and I can go back to whatever the normal track count is. So favorites mode is definitely going to be utilized in my studio. And the last thing that seems to be different are obviously the screens or adaptive screens. When I first saw the advertisement, I wasn't that impressed, I have to be honest. But honestly, having them here in the studio, they're actually kind of neat. I especially like having the track count. This one here on the left I have set to adapt, which means whatever I touch is going to be reflected on this screen, whereas this screen is always supposed to be showing the track count like that. And so that helps me kind of just work my way around. So what am I looking at? Here I'm working on the cajon, and maybe I'm adding a little bit of punch. And so then my eyes are not deceiving me, right? I know for a fact that's what I'm looking at. And then maybe I go to the bass and I play with a little bit of compression or something. Again, I know that I'm working on track number 3. All right, so what seems to be the same with the Console 1 Mark III and the Console 1 Mark II? The workflow is very similar, but because everything seems to be a lot more kind of joined within this second iteration, it definitely feels a lot nicer on this one. Is it $900 nice? I don't know. I guess that's kind of up to you. We'll figure that out. But definitely looks a lot better. Something that they do have in common is the ability to favorite plugins. This is not the feature I was talking about a second ago, which is favorites, but you can favorite plugins within both of these units. Again, we have undo and redo with both of these units. You do have the ability to group within the Mark II, and you have the ability to group with the Mark III. What I love about grouping, and this goes for both of these units, is that changes to the high cut and low cut, input gain, drive character, pan, and volume are all going to be applied relative to the signal. Every other function is just going to be overridden. You can also copy tracks and sections with both the Mark II and the Mark III. So that's everything that's the same with both of those units. Let's look at what's different. Something that you need to know is that some Console 1 features that depend on the full Console 1 system can't be used from just the plugin. So in other words, you can't group, you can't copy, you can't use the experimental ABCD groups, you can't favorite with the plugin. You also can't use DAW specific features within the plugin. For example, you can't control track volume as you can with the hardware. You can't pan like you could control with the hardware. Solo or mute are also not possible to adjust from the Console 1 plugin. So thus far we've talked about all the new features, what's the same, what's different. Now let's go into the first things to do when you first set up the Console 1 Mark III. Like I said, adjust your screens. You can either use a VU meter, you can have this attached to an EQ, the compressor. Again, my setup, I like the adaptive screen on the left and the track screen on the right hand side. So these buttons are going to make those adjustments. I think the next move after that is to start favoriting your various channel strips. So for example, if I go into load section, I'll click and hold for that. You can see that when I go into, let's say, the filters, I already have the core suite filters favorited, and all I did was I used the knob here to select whatever it is I wanted to select, and then I click on favorites. So let me cancel this. I'll click and hold. If we go to the shape 1 module, you can see that I have these at the ready. I imagine these are the ones that I'm going to use the most. So I think this is the best way to set yourself up for success here. If I go to my equalizers, these will be the first two that I use the most often. And then finally my compressors are there. So I'll definitely be using these. And here is the drive section. And I love that SSL drive, so I'll definitely be getting my hands into that. This is an organizational tip. If I hit Command T and I go to the tagging system here, you're going to want to find this folder. It's called the SSX folder, and the file path can be found under Computer, Library, Application Support, Softube. Why this is important: if you're a UAD user UAD is going to drop in all of the maps for the Console One if you own the plugin or not. So you want to make sure that you delete anything that you don't need inside of this mapping folder, because if you don't, what's going to happen is you'll go to, let's say, select an EQ or something, and you're going to find a bunch of plugins that you don't own here. And so that's definitely going to inhibit your workflow. So I think deleting unnecessary SSX files is paramount, so go ahead and take care of that. And then I think the last thing is just to kind of set up what your default template is going to be. You can see the default inside of here. The way that I like to do it though is within Logic Pro. All right, so let me show you what I mean. Here's a new instance of the core mixing software, and you can see that I have drive enabled, filters, and tape. This is all I want every single time I open up the plugin. How did I do that? I went to the very top here under user default, and I saved these specific settings inside of what's called a user default file. Now what this is going to do every single time I bring up this plugin, all the settings are exactly the way I like them. I like to have a low cut 30 Hertz. I like to have a high cut at 17K. Not that I'll keep it this way, things might change, but this is just how I like to kind of start things off. And just another quick tip, definitely set up your drive to be around 5.0 so you can get that analog emulation sound. So then the final question really becomes, is it worth it? Well, in the next video, I'll actually be showing you how this works. I'll be mixing on it, but I'll let you be the judge. Check this out. I'll just go ahead and play the introduction of this song. And the first thing I'll do is I'll just leave it on, and then I'll bypass every instance that I have set up within my track with all of my preliminary settings. So no particular, add-ons with EQ or anything like that. And you decide if you think this sounds better for you. So let me go ahead and play this, and then I'll bypass everything. So to me, that's a great bump in production, considering that I'm just using the tape preamp, the low cut and high cut filters, and the drive section. It's helping my production, and I haven't really done anything yet, so this is definitely a great add-on. If you don't have the controller, you could obviously just add, a bunch of different tape emulations at the end of the chain. That definitely helps as well. So the price, again, as mentioned, it is definitely a steep price. Is it worth it? My personal take is this: it's not worth it if you're a beginner. I don't think this is a worthy investment if you're not really making any money doing this. But let's say you're further along, you've got some royalties coming in, maybe you have a couple publishing deals. This thing will definitely pay for itself in that regard. For those of you that are seasoned, you know that making one investment can carry you through a year or 2 more years. It kind of like helps propel you forward. So in that way, I definitely feel it's worth it. If you've been doing this long enough, you want to treat yourself, you've been grinding, you just need to kind of push through the finish line. I think that's cool. Is it necessary? Absolutely not. We can make incredible music in the box, but for those of you that are just looking for a little bit more efficiency, you want to improve your workflow, you want to get 5% better, then I think this is definitely a worthy investment, even though it has a steep price tag. So if you want my personal take, I'm not sending this back. I think this is a good upgrade for what I'm doing. What I'll do with my Console One Mark II, I have no idea, but this is definitely going to stay in my studio here. What I'm most excited about is what Softube is going to add on in the near future. So that's why I'll be keeping this. I think it has a lot of promise for the next couple of years. Let me know what you guys think about the unit thus far. There's a lot of great videos out there, but do check out the next video that I'll be putting out where I'll be mixing and using this in application. All right, guys, this is Eddie Gray signing off. Thank you guys so much. Take good care. Bye.